Yes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to day one of ISTE and ITK BizTalks. Today we have with us Kailash Neelakantan. He is an MBA graduate from the Chicago Booth School of Business and an incoming associate at Analysis Group. Hello, sir. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. How are you? Thanks so much
I'm
for
good.
having me.
We are very delighted and honored to have you with us. Um, so I think we can start off to the questions that we have for you today.
Sure. Awesome.
So the first question that we have is coming from an engineering background, what fascinated you towards finance? Why the shift?
Sure. So it was a gradual shift. Like most 18-year-old kids, I also went into engineering. And while I liked electrical engineering, uh, I think I was good at the math part, but I discovered that I didn't have the intuition about the engineering part. So I was deciding on what to do next, and I happened to do a couple of courses in economics at college, engineering economics, financial management, etc. So that sort of piqued my interest in finance. And we also had these sort of mini projects at NITK, like you can do projects outside of your department. And that time there was an interesting transaction which was going on. There was an LBO of Dell which was happening. So a group of friends decided to analyze the transaction for our project. So that really got me interested to understand like, what leverage buyouts are, what is private equity, and all that. And finally, in my third year, I interned at Goldman Sachs in their engineering division. While my work was engineering, but I participated in a lot of town halls and meetings with finance professionals from banking, trading, research, etc. That is what really cemented my interest in finance, and I thought this is something I could do and be good at. So ultimately, it was sort of being open to experiences and yeah, and figuring out what I'm good at, and ultimately decided that finance would be the way to go.
That sounds very lovely, sir. Once this realization that struck you that you were meant to pursue a path in finance, what are
Mhm.
the efforts that you put into pursuing it? You're pursuing your career further in college or outside college in order to further your education in business?
Sure, that's a great question. So one of the sort of hurdles which I faced when I was in college was that there were not many people who wanted to do finance. There was not much awareness. It was basically a bunch of friends who had a common interest. In terms of what I did in college, from an academic standpoint, I obviously took courses. We are fortunate to have a very good HSM department. So whether it's courses in economics or finance, that really helped me. Outside of it, obviously did all my mini projects in the HSM department. That also helped a lot. One thing which I did, which probably is often neglected, is reaching out to alums and professionals in the industry, especially in finance and management. The more you reach out, the more visible you are. And it's always a good idea to seek out mentors. Alums are always happy to help if you reach out. So I think that is something I really leveraged, and I encourage all of you to do so. Um, a, like this will give you more visibility, and B, it will also be helpful in terms of knowledge building. You'll get more hands-on practical experience about the industry. So that is all I did in college. In terms of my preparation after graduating, obviously I was new to finance. I didn't know much. So one thing which helped me was doing the CFA. So I prepared for CFA level one, which is essentially MBA coursework, MBA first year coursework. So that sort of put me ahead of my peers in terms of knowledge. So for those of you who are interested in finance, I strongly encourage you to look at the CFA route. I think you can take the first level when you're in your final year. So if that is something which interests you, you should definitely do it.
Thank you, sir. Now, post college, how do you think your various job profiles contributed to you pursuing an MBA?
Sure. So when I started out, I did not have a very strong inclination to go towards an MBA. I was just taking things as they came. So my intention was to sort of build my expertise in finance and then think about what to do next. So when I joined Nomura, it was a very small team. I worked on a very niche product, convertible bonds. Similarly, when I shifted to BlackRock, I was still in the capital markets domain, but focused more on structured products, which is again very niche. So at a certain point, I was concerned that because I am like so specialized and because I'm one of the many engineers working in financial services, that might actually not be great for me in terms of my MBA applications. Um, but I think, fortunately, in my case, because I worked in small teams, I had a lot of visibility to senior management. Very early on, I started leading meetings, publishing research. And because of that, I got visibility and got more high profile projects. And when you work on such projects, you have a lot to talk about and like write about when you're applying for your B schools. So I think that is something which really helped me. And this is not specific to finance, like whatever you end up doing. Ultimately, what B schools or anybody, even your future employers, are interested in seeing is that A, you're good at what you do, and B, you've taken ownership and you can step up when the time comes and lead teams. So I guess that is what really helped me. So whenever you guys start working, you should really make it a point to sort of be more visible, uh, get into leadership roles as quickly as you can, and really take ownership of what you do.
Thank you, sir. Sounds very interesting. And you could not have stressed more on the importance of leadership in order to pursue MBA. While going through your profile, we noticed that that you landed the 1898 Merit Scholarship. Could you
Mhm.
elucidate on the scholarship that Indian students could avail and how you achieved this?
Sure. So when it comes to scholarship, there are different kinds of scholarships available for B school applicants. So just to list them out, um, there are merit scholarships. There are scholarships which you get in your second year. These could be either because of the industry you're recruiting for or the courses that you've taken. And there are also some scholarships for students hailing from a certain background or a specific country. So there might be scholarships for Indian students or people from military backgrounds or whatnot. Right. So going into merit scholarships, the one that I got, 1898 scholarship, I got that with my admit. So when the admissions committee feels that you're a strong fit for the school and you have the requisite academic slash professional achievements, they would themselves give you the scholarship. So this is not something you specifically apply for, right? But you can always sort of negotiate the scholarship amount, and people do that all the time, especially with USP schools. Um, so there are also merit scholarships that you get in your second year, but for that you have to show like good academic track record in your first year, and you also have to typically submit an essay. Um, Coming to industry type scholarships, so people say getting into private equity or marketing or whatnot. Like for them, like every B school have like certain scholarships which they could avail. Again, you have to show leadership in a specific industry and an aptitude for that industry. There are country type scholarships. So at least here at Booth, there are a couple of scholarships for Indians. So there's the Akhtar Ali Tobacco Wala scholarship, which is given to Indians. There's also a Ramakrishnan Fellowship, and there are a couple of others which you can get. And this is obviously based on where you're from. In addition to all these scholarships, which are probably school specific, there are also other endowments in India that you could think of applying to. Maybe you guys have heard about this. There's the Narottam Sheikh Saria Foundation, which gives out scholarships to people going abroad, either for MS or MBA. There's also the JN Tata Endowment, which is a grant of 7.5 lakhs, I think, for students who are going abroad again, either for MS or MBA. But the thing about these scholarships is that they're not so much scholarships as zero interest loans, so you do have to pay them back. But yeah, it's interest free.
Thank you for briefing us through the various scholarships that are available. Now,
Mhm.
moving on to your college experience, how is Chicago Booth? How was your experience there?
Booth was an awesome experience. It was my first extended international stay, and I really loved the 2 years I spent at Booth. If I have to think about what really stood out, firstly, the people. Because of the network that Booth has, like we have sort of reached to some of the top minds in business, be it CEOs or top professors. One of the highlights of my B school experience was sitting in the same room as the CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, and asking him questions about what he thinks of the financial services industry, what's going on with JP Morgan, etc. I also had an opportunity to attend a panel with Satya Nadella. That was an amazing experience. Obviously, these CEOs aside, your classmates themselves, I think it's a privilege to be among such smart people who are definitely going to do great things in life. So that's a very powerful network to have. So that was definitely a highlight. Second for me was diversity. And I'd like to stress on this because this is what really differentiates the USB schools from Indian B schools. So I had the opportunity to interact with people from so many different backgrounds, people who were, say, school teachers before coming to Booth, military, artists, whatnot, along with other conventional roles, of course, engineers and um, bankers, whatnot. So that really is a great experience. I had a friend who was a sniper with the Singaporean military. So I think that is probably an extreme of the diversity that you see at U.S. business schools. But when these people bring in their experience into the classroom in case discussions, that really broadens your perspective. So that was definitely something very different for me, coming from a cookie cutter engineering background. Thirdly, of course, the academics. I chose Booth for the academic component. I'm a huge fan of Raghuram Rajan. I have been following his career since I was in my third year. So it was actually amazing to be in his class, be a part of the case discussions. And interestingly, I'm also working on a project with him now, so that's a dream come true. Uh, then, secondly, another professor, which sort of who really inspired me was Professor Douglas Diamond. I feel one of these days he's definitely going to win a Nobel for his work in banking theory. So to listen to him talk about bank runs, financial panics, and how he brought those concepts alive was definitely a great experience. So yeah, these are my top reasons for Both, and it's definitely been a great journey.
I'm sure that after listening to your advice, I mean your view of Chicago Booth about the minds and the academians, the diversity there, and I'm pretty sure that all of us would be very much enthusiastic to also pursue perhaps an MBA in Chicago Booth one day.
Definitely.
Moving on, moving on. How was your job experience in the USA, and what did you feel was different in the work and the student culture as compared to India?
Sure. So there are similarities and differences. So in my case, I have worked at big companies. Like I worked at big companies before coming to Boots, Nomura, BlackRock, Goldman. So these companies, at least in terms of the procedures and processes, things are quite standard. So Whether you're working in Bangalore or Bombay or New York, it's not that different. Standard companies coming to college, you writing an aptitude exam, like getting through to interviews, getting passing those interviews and getting the job. So not much networking required. In the US, it actually matters a lot. You have to demonstrate a strong interest in the industry and the companies that you're applying to. uh, you can't just be great at the technicals and hope like you get into the company. And this is true both for MBA jobs and also technical jobs like engineering jobs. You have to demonstrate a strong fit, because in the end HR can sort of veto your team even if they like you, right? So that's the biggest difference I felt. Secondly, the focus on soft skills, how you present yourself, that's very important. How well turned out you are, how you speak, how you write, even something as uh, trivial as how you present your resume. Like there's a specific format, so people expect you to sort of follow that. So those things are extremely important, and you will be judged if you are not up to the standard. And thirdly, emphasis on leadership. So whatever your level, whether you're starting as an analyst or you're a very senior person, they expect you to take ownership, to lead in whatever capacity that you can. And they're very explicit about it. They expect you to contribute to meetings, like talk, no matter how junior you are. So I think that was the biggest learning for me. So yeah, those are the three things I find which are very different in US versus India. Same goes for the student experience as well.
Thank you so much, sir, for bringing these into our perspective. Last question that we have for you is, with the onset of COVID-19, how do you think the business world would pan out in the recent future?
Honestly, it's hard to gauge the impact of COVID-19, and much depends on when you find the vaccine, when lockdown measures are lifted, uh, etc. And industries and companies do need to adapt to the new normal, whether it's ensuring employee safety, higher automation, or dealing with supply chain disruption, because this pandemic is impacting everybody at the same time. Um, my sense is that things will get worse before they get better. So some business models may no longer be viable, and those companies will go out of business. And as we've already seen, aggressive measures will need to be taken both from governments and central banks to shore up the economy. Um, as with any economic disruption, there are winners and losers, right? So when you think about this specific economic crisis, the winners are obviously healthcare. So whether it's diagnostics or even med tech or vaccine development, I think those companies would see an upswing. Then when it comes to technology, I guess that's good news for all of you, because whether it's cloud or communication technology, chip manufacturers, all of these would definitely be positively impacted given the remote work environment, etc. Obviously, in terms of losers, the consumer durable sector, so you would not buy a car when you when you're not sure about your income or job, right? The hospitality sector, oil and gas, and whatnot. But I'd like to be optimistic in the end, and looks like we are nearing a vaccine. So if that happens, we will recover slowly but surely. In the end, I feel you should not let this crisis sort of impact your long-term goals as students. So if you're interested about in a certain field, you should definitely like pursue it, albeit with a little bit of caution. So when it comes to your short-term recruiting goals, probably be a little more strategic and think about which companies are hiring where, and try to position yourself in that direction. But in the longer term, I feel you should really be true to yourself and stick to the areas that really interest you.
Thank you so much, sir, for all this, for this entire session, and for ending it with the beautiful quote that you said, that we should pursue, we should not, this COVID-19 should not stop us from pursuing what we want to pursue, but instead pursue it in a strategic manner. With this, we will close this entire session, and we will open the floor to the viewers, and we for the next till 8:45, and
Mm-hmm.
I will be posing questions that they have for you specifically. We're going to start with Arpita Rakesh.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to know what are some ideas for financial projects that you think students who are on their way to start their job, that is a 2020 batch, should work on during the free time now.
Ideas for financial projects. So, one thing I encourage all of you, if you're especially interested in banking, is to pick up a few transactions and sort of try to work on a term paper if you can. It's always interesting because so much has already been written and said about these transactions. It's always new if you are able to bring in your fresh perspective. So that is something I would encourage you to do. Secondly, anything which sort of relates to the impact of COVID-19 on economies, whether it's the impact of fiscal stimulus or monetary policies. So central banks across the world have been very aggressive when it comes to stimulating the economy, whether it's the Federal Reserve or even the Reserve Bank of India. So try to think about the impact of monetary policy, the effectiveness of monetary policy. You could also try to do say a study of like different economic crises. That is always interesting. So 2008, the current pandemic, the 1990s tech bust. So I think that would be an interesting study. Obviously, there are more ideas, and I'm happy to connect offline with students who either want guidance or ideas on the projects you want to pursue. But off the top of my head, these would be some of the ideas I suggest.
Thank you, sir. The second question is from Jayant Vikram. He
Mhm.
wants to know, does our place of internship matter when it comes to applying for master's program?
Place of internship. Masters, so is this MBA or are you thinking about MIM, MS? What is there like anything specified in the question?
There's nothing specified as of now, but
Okay, cool.
yeah.
So obviously MBA is ruled out because for MBA you need work experience. You need to be working for a minimum of 3 to 4 years. So I assume this question is for either MS or MIM, right?
But just to
It
clarify, even now it's with MBA.
MBA. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So MBA internships matter less. Your full time matters more. Uh, and in terms of if you're asking about brands or companies, yes, it does matter if you have a strong brand on your CV. It will matter, not because admission committees will be enamored by the big names. I think they're pretty good at not doing that. It's just that they know these companies. So, for example, if you work at a company like Goldman Sachs, right? Any admissions committee, any place in the world will know Goldman Sachs, so it will be easier for them to sort of judge what you've done there and what you've achieved. But if you work, say, in a startup, then you would need to be more proactive. Talk about your startup, talk about your role there, talk about who's invested in your startup. So it really doesn't matter as far as admission decisions go. It's up to you, like how proactive you are and how you portray your experience and how you talk about your experience. So yeah, to the extent that it makes your life easier, yeah, having big brands on your CV matters. But in the end, it's all about your experience.
So broadening out, same question for MIM and MIF.
Mhm.
How should one go about it?
So MIM and MIF are very different, so you don't need as much work experience. I personally did not consider these options, but I know friends who have pursued MIM. So for this, I believe your work experience matters less. I would think it's more about your academics and any progress that you've shown. in terms of which industry you want to pursue post MIM. So, for example, I know a friend of mine who worked at Goldman Sachs Engineering who went and pursued his MIM at HEC Paris. And he had, I guess, a couple of years of work experience. So, work experience is not that important. It's having the right academic skill set and showing progress towards whatever you want to pursue after your degree. Having said that, both in case of MIM and MBA, a strong professional recommendation helps a lot. So make sure so if you're getting your recommendation from the right person, and make sure you've done some like good work before you actually apply to these places, because they will be interested to know what you've done in your workplace. Both in terms of the actual work and any leadership roles that you might have had. So that is my one piece of advice. Recos are extremely important. So yeah, make sure you're getting them from the right people.
So the next question is by Vineet Narayan.
Mm-hmm.
He's confused between pursuing core and or management, and wants to ask you if there is a way to find out if management is your calling.
The only way you can find out is by actually doing projects. So to allude to the first question, if you have some free time, try to do some projects at college or outside. There are also a lot of case competitions which happen. Typically, these are open for B school students, but try to find out if there are any undergraduate case study competitions. You could try to start something at NITK, probably at ISTE. So that is a very good way to find out how you are thinking about these problems, how you think about business, economics, finance. It's not rocket science. It's just a very different skill set. Core, obviously, you'll know. Like I pretty much knew at the end of my second year that engineering was not my calling. So if that's the case, like you'll know in when you're doing engineering. The advice I would give is like be open to new areas and experiences, and sort of be very aggressive when you're pursuing them. If you're sort of laid back and you think you'll end up where you'll end up, that's not a very good strategy. Uh, so at least till if MBA is your interest, then you have to sort of be a little conscious about how you craft your resume. So when you are in college, it's a safe space. You can explore 100 different things. So take advantage of the time and the opportunities you have at NITK. And yeah, that's my 2 cents. The only way to find out whether finance or management in general is your calling is by doing projects, courses, whatever you can.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is from Anantu Muralidharan. He wants to know what do you think about taking MBA through distant education?
Um, Personally, I don't think that's a great idea. There are a lot of online MBA programs, distance learning programs. I do not strongly advocate for these programs because the biggest value add for any MBA program is the network that you build when you're on campus interacting with like 400 500 different people across 2 years. The connections you build will really help you whatever you end up doing in your life, and that's the whole point of doing an MBA. So whether you do it in India or the US, I would suggest you do an on-campus program. um, those are my thoughts. And if you really want to learn any subject, there are so many MOOC courses available. You can always go to Coursera and learn basic finance, accounting, whatever you want to. So getting knowledge now in these times is not an issue at all. The point of an MBA is to build a network. So I strongly suggest you consider on-campus programs.
Thank you, sir. Now we have Vinayak Singh. He wants to know that you had mentioned now during your speech you had mentioned that you were interested in the activities of the professors from Chicago booth.
Mhm.
So he wants to know how you started to follow the professor's activities from booth.
So in terms of professors, so a bit of background, like I myself come from an academic background. My dad is a professor himself at IIT Kanpur. So I've always been interested in academics. And in my third year was when sort of Raghuram Rajan became the RBI governor. And that is when central banking became the cool thing to do. So that's when I started following him. And personally, I don't know if a lot of you guys know this, but the former dean of Chicago Booth is actually an NITK alum, Sunil Kumar. He even spoke on a recent webinar by the Alumni Association. So these two people sort of really captured my interest at Booth, and the more I learned about Booth, the more I realized that it's a research powerhouse, whether it's finance, economics, marketing, whatnot. So I was specifically interested in finance, so I followed what Booth was doing in finance. Um, so what I did, which I suggest all of you guys do, is to read lots of books. There's so many books available. Rajan himself has written 4 books now. There are other books by Chicago professors, Wharton professors, other industry professionals. So it's good. 2 ways. First, it obviously builds the knowledge that you need to get into finance and also apply to these programs. And secondly, it sort of makes you sort of acclimatize to the business language, how people talk in the industry. That's very important because you cannot just go into a meeting and sort of, speak the way you speak in college, right? So that is something I did. I really read a lot before applying to B schools even. Even as a student at NITK, I read a lot outside of engineering. So I strongly suggest that you guys do that. It'll help you sort of get a clear sense of what your interests are and what you're good at.
Sir, another very common question that a lot of students, including our Venkatvasan, has posed to you is, what were the the projects that you took in our management department,
Hmm.
and yeah, and could you elaborate on them?
Sure. So the good thing about NITK is that they allow you to do projects outside your department. So the one I am talking of is a one credit project which I did, like couple of them I did at HSM. They were called mini projects. So the first project I did was on analyzing an LBO transaction. So as I mentioned, in early 2013, Dell was going private. So the founder, Michael Dell, and a private equity firm, Silver Lake Partners, they were taking the firm private. And the reasons stated were that they want to focus on innovation and whatnot. So that really sort of captured my attention. Like, why would a company want to go private? Why would you like borrow to like purchase, like take a company private? What's this business of private equity and whatnot, right? So that is when I decided to sort of work on this transaction, and I had a couple of friends who worked with me. Um, we basically sort of looked at the transaction, tried to build a financial model of our own, and tried to think about why this was good in the larger scheme of things. So that really helped sort of clarify a lot of the questions I had about finance and capital markets. That was one project I did. The second project I did was more economics focused. So I just did a comparative study of BRIC economies, so Brazil, Russia, India, China. So how these economies are different in terms of their history, what they're good at, trade relations, and whatnot. So that was again very useful in terms of understanding international trade flows, economic policy, monetary policy. So that was great. And in addition to these, I did a course on international financial management by Professor KB Kiran. I'm not sure if that course is being offered, but again, that course was super helpful. both in terms of giving me the corporate finance fundamentals and also thinking about larger international issues like foreign exchange, like monetary policy and whatnot. So I guess these are the things which really cemented my interest. And outside of this, I like listened to a lot of online lectures, spoke to a lot of NITK alumni who are working in finance, so that also helped a lot.
Thank you, sir. It's very inspirational to hear you give your advices. The next one is Sarthak Pandey. He wants to ask you, having pursued his bachelor's in engineering, how do you suggest that he move ahead with business studies or management, or any path or stream that he can take up?
Sure. So, if you've graduated and you're pursuing an engineering job, my suggestion is that you try to do something outside of your job, either through like being part of certain extracurricular groups or doing online courses such as Coursera or whatnot, right? And in general, like network to understand where your interests lie. Read a lot, that is always helpful. Specifically, if you are interested in finance, I would strongly suggest you to find a job which is more in line with your interest. Finance is sort of the more you delay getting into the field, the harder it gets. That's been my experience. So if you know you're interested in a certain field, I would suggest you aggressively network and try to like get into finance, marketing, whatever it is that interests you. So that is how I would think about it. So A, like read, B, network, and C, try to break into the field of interest. Because it is unrealistic to think that having worked in, say, I'm using an example as a software engineer for 4 years, you do an MBA and then you sort of switch into, say, investment banking. It's very hard because a lot of these international MBAs index heavily on your past experience and what you sort of bring to the table, right, in terms of your next career move. So don't wait for a master's degree to change your career track. You have to be proactive and try to do it right after graduation by networking and yeah, developing your knowledge through courses.
Thank you, sir. For those who are viewing this, we will be winding up by in the next with the next 3 to 4 questions. So more after having so yeah, and with that in mind, the next person is Avikal Saga, and he wants to pose a question. Given the chances someone does an MBA and someone does an MIM, then does
Mm-hmm.
it matter in the long run in terms of the significance of the degree?
Not really. It doesn't matter. In the end, it's about how you do at your job. What I think matters is the network. MIM is I'm given to understand it's still sort of a not a very established program. Obviously, a lot of people have done it, but MBA is a much older program. And at some of these schools, especially Booth, Wharton, Harvard, the alumni network is so huge, and that itself is a big advantage. Like wherever you are, geographically, whatever you're doing professionally, you can always reach out to your alums for help and advice. And that, in my thinking, is the biggest advantage of doing an MBA. But when you're in your job, when you're like doing your day-to-day like job, it really depends on how you network within the company, uh, how good you are at your job. That will take you places. Um, MBA is good for having that strong network, but that is pretty much where it ends.
Thank you, sir. Shitish Khatri wants to ask you, what does admissions committee expect from a guy who is working in a proper company while evaluating the applications?
Um, so they In terms of expectations, any business school would expect leadership. So if you can show that in your job you have taken the initiative, you have led teams, you are somebody who can get things done, right? That is what they're interested in seeing. They don't particularly care about what industry you've worked in. Obviously, some industries are more competitive than others to get in. Not because there's something wrong with the industry, it's just that there's so many people in that. So, say, for example, IT or even finance, right? Like, there's so many Indian engineers who are either in IT or doing finance. So, it's more competitive, and you have to differentiate yourself either um, through what you've done in your job or the research that you have done on schools. So I feel pursuing any specific job does not necessarily put you at a disadvantage. What admissions really cares about is that you have the requisite interest and you've demonstrated leadership in the past, which shows to them that you'll succeed at business school. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And the second thing, which I feel a lot of us don't do when applying to B schools, is that we don't do research. So earlier I spoke about the importance of networking and fit, right? The same thing applies to B school applications too. Schools really want to see that you've done your homework. You really want to be at that school, and you have strong reasons for saying so. So that is something which usually is the determining factor, how much you have done your research and why you believe you're a strong fit for that school. So yeah, so my advice to all of the MBA aspirants is to demonstrate leadership, be good at your job, whatever it is that you're doing, and do your homework before applying. And of course, there's a GMAT aspect also. You have to do well in your GMAT.
Thank you, sir. Next one is from Jaraj R. Agrawal. You had mentioned that Booth Research is a powerhouse. Booth is a research powerhouse. Are different B schools good for different career goals?
Um, Yeah, yes and no. There are some B schools which are great at certain industries. So what immediately comes to mind is like Wharton is great if you want to do private equity, right? Booth is great if you want to do investment management. Harvard is amazing for general management. So yeah, every school has its niche because of how their alumni have done and where they are working. But broadly, I feel if you are somebody who wants to get into one of these standard sectors like banking, consulting, product management, and whatnot, most of these good B schools have enough recruiting opportunities. So I really don't think you should pick and choose based on like what school is good at. Most schools are good at these standard like recruiting areas, right? So you should really choose based on um, which which school resonates the most with you. Like you need to have strong reasons to apply there, whether it's somebody you know in the alumni network or whether it's the professors or several other reasons. So choosing a school based on like a notion of what the school does best is not the right thing to do. I feel you should take a more holistic approach to your applications.
Thank you, sir. The next question is should one pursue MBA in India or US and give them right after bachelor's? Or should they attempt to have a decent work experience?
Um, So India versus US, it's a matter of personal preference. I really wanted to have international experience. That is something which is important to me. And secondly, I wanted to study in an environment which was diverse. Unfortunately, whatever you end up doing, like wherever you go for your MBA in India, the fact is 90% of the student body will have experiences similar to you. They'll be engineers from a top school with experience at a decent company, and after a couple of years, they choose to do their MBA. So, in terms of diversity, you really don't get to see it. That for me was really important, and that's why I chose to come to the US. And secondly, if you want to work in the US, it always helps to have a US degree. Um, so if you're going to a top IIM or an ISB, you can work, say in India, Asia Pacific, in some instances even Europe, right? London, Frankfurt, whatnot. But US is very specific in the sense that they usually prefer US degrees. So that was another consideration. So a US MBA would open up doors for the US job market. So that was my preference. But yeah, Indian MBAs are just as good. Like if you are able to break into a top IIM or ISP, these are great schools and they'll give you amazing opportunities after you finish your MBA. In terms of work experience, I would strongly advocate for a couple of years of work experience at least. So if you're applying for, say, a top IIM, like try to have 1 or 2 years of experience before you apply. If you're applying for an MBA in the US, then try to have at least 4 years of work experience before you apply. The reason I say this is a lot of MBA education is case based, and people who have work experience bring in a lot of insights from their experience into the class, and that really enriches the discussion. And you will be able to pick up on these subtle points in class if you have experience. If you're a fresher, you might not pick up on all these things. So I strongly advise all of you to think about working for a few years before you start considering these schools.
Due to the paucity of time, that will be the last question for today. Thank you everyone for attending the session. So, but there were a lot more that were unanswered. Is there any way that they can reach you?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer any more questions. So they can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or I can even share my email address. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them over email or do phone calls if that helps. So whatever works for you guys. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any other questions in terms of career advice or whatever it is that you want to talk about.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed a very insightful session. And thank you for stressing on the importance of leadership, networking, and also how aggressive we should be when we are pursuing our passion or desire. And thank you. We are ISTE is very grateful and indebted to you. And for those of you who are watching, we will be answering the rest of your doubts through a blog, which will be published soon. And also stay tuned for day 2 of ISTE and ITK's BizTalks. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye.